Every crime lord has an origin story, and for Periasamy, his began in the streets of Phoenix, a suburb in Durban, South Africa. Born into a life surrounded by crime and violence, he quickly learned that power meant everything. He started small, running errands for local gangs, delivering packages, and slowly earning their trust. His natural charisma and ruthless ambition made him a perfect candidate for leadership. By his 20s, he had already made a name for himself in the illegal drug trade. The Phoenix Bloods, a gang notorious for its control over drug distribution and illicit businesses, saw potential in him. He climbed the ranks by orchestrating small-time heists, eliminating rivals, and gaining influence over tow truck businesses, a key industry for gang control. But power came with a price, and his rivals were always watching. Soon, the saps had their eyes on him, tracking his movements and gathering evidence. In 2018, his world took a major hit when he and 6 others, including his own brother, were arrested. It was a temporary setback, but for Periasamy, it was a sign that the law was finally catching up. Little did he know, his fate was already sealed. Periasamy's influence extended far beyond drug dealing. His empire was built on control, intimidation, and money laundering. The tow truck and minibus taxi industries were the perfect front for his operations. These businesses, known for their violent territorial disputes, gave Periasamy an additional stream of income and muscle on the streets. His crew controlled accident scenes, demanding exorbitant fees for towing services while running drugs in the process. He was known for his brutal enforcement of loyalty. Cross him once, and you wouldn't live to regret it. The power he wielded made him nearly untouchable, with even some local authorities allegedly turning a blind eye to his activities. But as his empire grew, so did his enemies. Rival gangs, law enforcement, and even former allies started to see him as a threat. The 2018 drug bust was just the beginning of his troubles. It was a warning sign that his grip on power was starting to loosen. Yet, despite the arrests and legal troubles, Periasamy still walked the streets a free man when he was finally released on bail. But his freedom would be short-lived. By the time Periasamy walked out of Kokstad Supermax Correctional Services, he knew he was living on borrowed time. The underworld had changed in his absence, and his enemies were more powerful than ever. Earlier that year, another tow truck driver had been executed in broad daylight, sending a clear message to anyone in the game. Speculation grew that this was part of a larger gang war, one that Periasamy was deeply entangled in. Even those closest to him warned him to lay low, but he refused. He still saw himself as the untouchable kingpin of Phoenix. The mall shooting was no random act of violence. It was calculated, efficient, and designed to send a message. Periasamy was shot multiple times in a public parking lot in what many believe was a well-orchestrated hit. Witnesses reported hearing gunshots before chaos erupted in the shopping center. Within moments, he was dead, his body riddled with bullets before paramedics could even attempt to save him. His story was over, but the war he left behind was only just beginning. With Periasamy gone, questions arose about what would happen next. His death wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a power shift in Durban's criminal underworld. Some believed it was an inside job, a betrayal by someone close to him. Others speculated that it was retaliation from rival factions looking to take over his operations. The Phoenix Bloods, now leaderless, were at risk of crumbling, making way for new criminal enterprises. His family, already entangled in their own legal battles, now faced a different kind of war. Periasamy's brother Kevin and sister-in-law Desiree had their own cases to deal with, but with his death, they became immediate targets. The tow truck industry, already a battlefield, saw a new surge of violence as different groups scrambled for control. But perhaps the biggest mystery of all, who ordered the hit? And more importantly, was this the end of Periasamy's empire, or just the beginning of a new reign of terror? The assassination of Periasamy wasn't just a gang-related killing, it was an event that sent shockwaves across Durban. The public execution in a shopping mall parking lot showed just how fearless his killers were. Some theories suggest that the hitmen were professionals, hired by powerful individuals who wanted him gone. Others believe it was an act of revenge, possibly linked to his long history of betrayals. Periasamy had many enemies, including former allies who had turned against him. His reckless decision to stay in the public eye despite multiple warnings may have sealed his fate. The police, now investigating his murder, have yet to make any arrests. But the lack of leads suggests that whoever was behind this had covered their tracks well. Many in the community believe that justice will never truly be served. In the criminal underworld, power shifts in silence, and those who pull the strings remain in the shadows. As the investigation continues, one thing is certain: Durban's streets will never be the same again. Following Periasamy's assassination, the South African Police Service, SAPS, quickly launched an investigation, but few believed justice would be served. Durban's criminal underworld had long been intertwined with corruption, and many suspected that officers on the force were either complicit in the crime or too afraid to act. The official statement from SAPS was vague, confirming the murder and announcing that a case had been opened, but offering little else. Despite being a known gang leader with an extensive criminal record, Periasamy had managed to stay out of prison for years. How? Many believe it was due to bribes, inside connections, and a justice system that worked in favor of those with money and influence. His release from Kokstad Supermax after multiple serious charges raised serious questions. How does a man facing murder and drug-dealing charges walk free on bail? Some claim his release was part of a larger setup, perhaps even orchestrated by those who wanted him dead. If that theory holds any weight, then his killers might have been waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. With no arrests made and little evidence to go on, many believe this is a case that will quietly disappear, just like so many before it. With Periasamy gone, a power vacuum was left in his wake. The Phoenix Bloods had lost their leader, and rival gangs wasted no time in trying to claim his territory. The tow truck and minibus taxi industries, already plagued by violence, became even more dangerous. New factions began fighting for control over drug distribution, vehicle extortion, and protection rackets. Some of these groups had been waiting for Periasamy's fall, seeing it as their opportunity to take over. Others, perhaps even those within his own organization, saw his death as necessary for survival. The police, overwhelmed by escalating gang wars, struggled to contain the violence. Meanwhile, community members feared that the chaos was only beginning. Where there was once one dominant force, now there were many, all fighting for control. Periasamy's assassination may have removed a dangerous figure, but it also unleashed a wave of new threats. If history has taught us anything, it's that crime doesn't simply disappear, it only changes hands. Beyond the headlines and gangland politics, it's the ordinary citizens of Phoenix who suffer the most. For years they lived under the shadow of crime, fearing the shootouts, extortion, and violence that came with gang control. Many local businesses were forced to pay protection fees or risk being targeted. The tow truck industry, which should have been about helping accident victims, became a battleground for criminals. Periasamy's death did little to ease these tensions. If anything, it made things worse. Now, every day felt like a countdown to the next shooting, the next hit, the next gang war. Innocent people had to be extra cautious, knowing that stray bullets didn't care who they hit. Families who lost loved ones to gang violence saw little justice, with cases dragging on for years or never being solved. Some began questioning whether it was even safe to stay in the area, while others had no choice but to endure. This wasn't just about one man's rise and fall. This was about an entire community trapped in a cycle of crime with no escape. Without Periasamy, the Phoenix Bloods stood at a crossroads. Either they would collapse or they would find a new leader. But who could step up to fill the void? His brother Kevin, still facing legal troubles, was an obvious choice, but with police watching closely, his influence was limited. Other high-ranking members of the gang saw an opportunity to seize control, and internal conflicts quickly began to emerge. The problem with an empire built on fear is that when the leader falls, so does loyalty. Some members jumped ship, aligning themselves with rival groups, while others sought to claim Periasamy's legacy for themselves. Meanwhile, the public wondered, would the gang continue operating, or would law enforcement finally dismantle them for good? But history has shown that taking out one leader rarely ends the problem. The crime syndicates of Durban had survived countless arrests and assassinations before, adapting and evolving with the times. Even if the Phoenix Bloods fell, another gang would rise to take their place. The names might change, but the cycle of violence remained the same. The story of Periasamy isn't just about crime. It's a reflection of a deeper issue within South African society. It highlights the failures of law enforcement, the corruption within the justice system, and the way crime thrives in desperate communities. His rise to power showed how easy it was for one man to control an entire industry through fear and violence. His fall proved that even the most powerful aren't immune to the consequences of their actions. But the bigger question remains, was his death justice or just another step in a never-ending cycle? Some see it as karma catching up, a violent man meeting a violent end. Others see it as a tragic reminder of how crime, once it grips a community, never truly lets go. The streets of Durban won't remember Periasamy for his wealth or influence. They'll remember the bloodshed he left behind. And as new names rise to take his place, the same story will repeat itself over and over again. Because in the world of crime, there are no happy endings, only new beginnings in an endless war. If you found this story fascinating, make sure to like and subscribe for more deep dives into the world of crime, power, and corruption. Let me know in the comments, was Periasamy's death inevitable, or could he have escaped his fate? Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.